In this video, I'm going to mark the samples that I just created in sample receiving and routed to sample depot or to sample prep. I'm going to mark that they have been prepped. So let's say I was a sample prep worker and I prepared the samples for the chemists. I might grind them, or I might mix them with something, or who knows what I would do, because it's just depends on the sample and what the SOP says to do. So I'm going to go to sample depot to do this. The sample I just created in sample receiving, or the samples I just created in sample receiving, were in a package, and that package ID is 2016 12 28-003. We're going to search for that. And there we see that here's the prep procedure that we have to follow to prepare it. Let's say I did this. I'm not going to mark this first container, the 00 container, as prepped, because that's the original sample that came into the lab. After I've followed this prep procedure, I should have another container, or maybe I just prepare the whole thing. But let's say I split it out into another container for the analysis. So I'm going to say that this was prepped, the split container. I'm going to click it, and then I'm going to click beside the next 01 container and say that was prepped. And I'm going to do it for all of the samples in the package, all the containers that needed prepping in the package, and then I'm going to save it. And now if you expand the child grids on these, you can see that I moved these to sample prep, the original container, and I moved this one to sample prep, but these also say that I marked them as prepped, whereas the original container doesn't show that I marked them as prepped. So now these will show up in the work list as prepped. Now I'm going to route these out of sample prep. First of all, I'm going to route the original containers to a storage location. So I'm going to select all of the original containers by clicking on the first one and then holding the control key down and then clicking on the rest of the original containers. And I'm going to reroute selected containers. I'm going to freeze them. I don't know if that's what you're supposed to do, but we're going to say we're going to freeze them. Save them in a freezer. So there's a freezer right here. And now those are in the freezer. It shows up above. Four containers are in the freezer and 4 are in sample prep. Now I want to get those other containers out of sample prep and I'm going to send them to the wet lab so that they can get them ready for analysis. Get them after following the sample prep of the water. There might be some other stuff, like they might have to put them in test tubes or something like that. Take them out of the containers and put them in test tubes to analyze them. So the next step might be the wet lab. So I'm going to select each of those, and I'm going to move those to the wet lab. Once again, these storage locations are created through an admin page on the admin menu. You can access it through the admin menu. So I'm going to the wet lab, and now we can see that 4 containers are in the wet lab and 4 are in sample storage. So that's how you show that you've prepped containers or prepped samples for the next step of the analysis.